Have you ever had the experience of telling yourself that you're going to do something and then finding yourself struggling to get started or even sabotaging the entire thing? Maybe, for example, you say, I'm going to go to the gym after work, and you never find yourself going. Or maybe instead you tell yourself, I'm going to stop getting angry so often in relationships, and yet you find yourself still feeling really fired up about things. Or maybe you even had the experience of telling yourself, I'm not going to text this person. I'm not going to reach out to them again. They're not right for me. And yet you find yourself continuously going back. Well, what are these parts of yourself? Are they two selves that are warring with each other? Well, not really. This is actually really illustrating the difference between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is responsible for roughly 3 to 5% of your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, and your decisions, while your subconscious mind is 95 to 97% responsible. This is part of why it's easy to, start a habit, but hard to stick to it. Or we find ourselves easily procrastinating or sabotaging all these different aspects of our lives. So, the real key to transformation, especially lasting transformation, exists within our capacity to understand and recondition our subconscious mind. And this applies to basically all the content I put out on this entire YouTube channel. It's all personal development for your subconscious mind and changing your patterns by engaging the subconscious in the process. Well, for this particular video, we're actually going to talk about how to overcome your big commitment fears using 3 steps or tools that allow us to leverage the subconscious mind in the healing process. And this is especially valuable if you're fearful avoidant, because you probably have experienced as a fearful avoidant wanting love, wanting connection, but fearing it at the same time. And that is not a fun way to live your life because it's quite exhausting to be back and forth, flip-flopping all the time. And it can make it very difficult to want to really engage and trust that something can work, leading to a lot of long-term heartbreak. So if you're new here, my name is Thais. I am the founder of the Personal Development School, as well as of this channel. I put daily content out here on YouTube, all about healing, transformation, specific to attachment styles, but a lot of other things. But every single video is really trying to engage the subconscious mind in our transformative process. So the first thing that you want to start being able to do in order to change and transform these fears of commitment, because you probably are aware on some level that the fear of commitment is not serving you, and you're probably aware on some level that you may be carrying some of these painful stories that cause you to push people away even when you deeply care about them. Maybe you even have somebody you feel like you pushed away and regret from the past, or maybe you've had an experience of feeling like you wish you didn't act a certain way in relationships over time, but upon deeper introspection realized, oh, it's because I was hurt or because I was afraid. And these are big components of what fearful avoidance carry. So our first big step is to surface out of your subconscious mind what I like to call our toxic dating stories or toxic relationship stories. We all have stories that have imprinted our subconscious mind. And for securely attached individuals, those stories tend to be quite favorable. I can trust people, I can rely on people, I am worthy of love, tend to be some of the stories. For fearful avoidant attachment styles and other insecure attachment styles, we are often imprinted with stories that are painful. And as somebody who is fearful avoidant myself before doing a lot of this work, it is of the utmost importance that we surface these stories and we set them to rest. These stories for fearful avoidance often look like things like, I can never trust people long term. One of us will always get bored and leave eventually. This person will eventually betray me. It's just a matter of time. Dating is horrible and I don't like it. Somebody will always leave eventually in the relationship. So why am I bothering to put myself out there? And generally, you'll see that these toxic dating stories are going to make it scarier to attach to somebody. In fact, the more attached you feel to somebody, the more scary that might actually feel at the same time. And while it feels beautiful to lower your guard and fall in love and deeply connect with somebody, you'll find that the further you get into a relationship where there's vulnerability, it's not just one-sided. It's not just feeling really great and experiencing the beauty and joy of love. It's like a dream come true and a nightmare altogether, because you'll feel these sides of you being pulled in different directions, really wanting closeness and then being scared. And that's not a way to live life, right? With anything, but this especially has a huge impact around our dating life. So I want you to take a second for step one. We have two other steps after this to really surface your toxic dating stories. What are these stories you tell yourself when you're going to go on a first date, or when you're getting closer and closer to somebody in a relationship, or when you have to be vulnerable? And you'll see that it's these stories that are actually originating from past painful experiences. For example, maybe you have the story everybody will leave because you saw a painful divorce. Maybe you have a story that one of you will always get bored because you find yourself constantly feeling restless and wanting to push people away. But upon further introspection, it's because you're afraid to be vulnerable, right? So try to really look at what these stories are that you're carrying. They usually come from painful events that existed in the past that have imprinted your subconscious. And as a result of that imprinting, you just project them out onto the future. You assume that because this was the past, this will always be the future, but it doesn't have to be this way. So I want you to get clear here. And then I want you to question these stories. I want you to ask yourself, can I 100% know that this will be the truth? And what could happen instead of these things that I'm afraid of? What are other possibilities? And writing out all those different other possibilities, it will help you release some of these stories emotionally and at the subconscious level. Point number two, you have to learn to communicate your needs. Fearful avoidants carry a big subconscious pattern of not communicating their needs. And in the words of a client that I think said this best. They said, I'd always want to leave relationships because eventually I would please somebody and get burnt out and feel like it was one-sided and I've had enough. And now I'm realizing as I can actually communicate my needs that I can actually see the potential for a relationship lasting and me wanting to be in it. And so there's a huge shift that comes around fears of commitment when we realize when there's things we don't like in relationships, they're often solvable problems. The more that we learn to open up and talk about them, communicate what we need to happen instead, communicate what's really going on for us, what we're feeling in an experience, and letting somebody know if they hurt or affect us, telling them what we want them to do differently, and growing in that together. In fact, this is what securely attached people do in relationships. This is how they operate. But as a fearful avoidant, and as somebody who was fearful avoidant, I can relate to this feeling like, okay, well, you have to just show up and pour yourself into a relationship. And then eventually you feel like, well, what about my experience? Okay, I guess this isn't the right fit for me. Let's walk away, without doing any of the work to communicate what you need first. And that will keep you on this merry-go-round of like lasting relationships that don't really get to last, because you'll find yourself in this position of getting burnt out and exhausted. But so many things are actually solvable, and you'll actually be able to receive love and deeply connect to people when you start letting people in and telling them what it is that you're looking for in a relationship dynamic. Now, before I get to point number three, I will say, if you want to just go through a course that lays this all out, has worksheets, a workbook, all of this stuff, you can check out for free, just for a limited time, our Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course. It has all this information about how to find and source these different relationships you have as a fearful avoidant, to your needs, to your toxic dating stories, and how to really recondition them in the shortest time possible. And that will be totally for free, just for a limited time, using the link down below. And number three, you actually have to learn to say no to things at times and be able to set your boundaries. Fearful avoidance on some subconscious level feel like they either get to have the relationship to themselves or have the relationship to somebody else, and it's one or the other all the time. Why is this? Because when you get into a relationship, you struggle with boundaries. And as long as that happens, eventually you'll feel like, I have to leave this person to choose myself. But if instead you can go into relationship dynamics learning what your boundaries are, feeling safe to communicate them, opening up about them. Sometimes a no to somebody else is a yes to yourself. And sometimes you need to say no and take time alone or go do your own thing, because it's part of how fearful avoidants are wired. They need autonomy and freedom and independence. But until you learn to do that effectively, you always feel like you're disappointing somebody or letting somebody down, or you'll guilt yourself for having boundaries, which will all be things that later sabotage your willingness to stay in relationships and stay committed. So these are 3 powerful places to start. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are new here, please consider subscribing to this channel, sticking around. I put literally daily videos out here every single day about the subconscious mind, attachment styles, and more. And I would love to have you here as a part of our community. Thank you so much for watching.